Much of the news is filled with political rancor and a war that continues to escalate between superpowers. This steals critical attention away from another significant problem we will face very soon: the zero-COVID policy lockdowns being implemented in enormous areas of China. In some regions, the Chinese government has started to erect metal barricades to block people from leaving their homes, preventing passage for even food or medicine. The lockdowns in Shanghai and Guangzhou, two of the largest areas, began at the start of April. While these problems in other cities in this part of the world may seem like a minor problem from our distant vantage point, they will soon have quite a tremendous impact on our lives. We will start to see them immediately and peaking sometime through mid to late summer. Nearly half of the containers that come into the United States originate in, you guessed it, China. You need to let that sink in for a moment. As we're about to cover in this video, China is locking up their workforce, which will soon have a dramatic impact on our ability to obtain items we are so used to getting quickly, or at all. If ever a storm was brewing on the horizon while our attention was elsewhere, this is it. The storm will definitely be felt throughout the world, and no trade agreement or central bank policy will fix or avert what is coming. In this video, we're going to take a sobering look at the lockdowns, the ramifications, the timeline of when you can expect to start to feel the pain of them, and what you can do now to lessen the impact of what's coming, regardless of where you live. It's not being covered thoroughly in most media outlets, because the impact of this dilemma will likely have a profound impact on our nation and economy. So let's discuss it. Download the Start Preparing Survival Guide to help you prepare for any disaster. I'll post a link in the description and comments section below, or visit cityprepping.com/get started for a free guide to help you get started on your journey of preparedness. China's zero-COVID policy lockdowns. Shanghai, China's biggest city and global financial hub, has a city of 26.3 million people and is in lockdown. Shenzhen, the critical link between Hong Kong and the rest of China, it has a population of 17.5 million people and is also in lockdown. Chongqing, the capital of northeast China's Jilin province, with a city of 9 million people, is also in lockdown. Guangzhou, a sprawling port city northwest of Hong Kong with a population of 15.3 million, is in lockdown. These are just some of the big-name locations on full or partial lockdown, forced quarantines of anyone who has come into contact with someone with COVID, and the origination of over $1 trillion per year in goods and resources. Widespread COVID outbreaks in China have brought entire cities to a standstill and hobbled manufacturing and shipping hubs throughout the country. An estimated 400 million people, or about 1/4 of China's overall population, have been in COVID-related lockdowns in recent weeks because of what is known as the country's zero-COVID policy. How bad is the outbreak? We don't really fully know because numbers from China always seem to be grossly reduced from their actual numbers. Also, reported numbers always trail well behind the actual current numbers, so today's numbers are at least a few weeks old. Reported deaths from COVID in March were just 465. The first half of April was up 180% to 1,300 deaths. Given China's propensity to report lower numbers than actual, and that these numbers are only for the first half of April, the numbers could be shockingly higher for the second half of April. Though China has a vaccine, most of its population hasn't received any booster. It's also safe to assume that the majority of the Chinese people may be infected but never get tested, so the reported numbers are always just a tiny percentage of the actual cases. The stealth Omicron variant that has led to this dramatic increase of cases continues to rage, and as people fester and incubated in their bodies, new variants may yet spin off. Most will be lesser versions of themselves. One may be even worse. Epidemiologists, they simply don't know. Based on this, it's not surprising China has opted to implement draconian government tactics, barring travel between provinces, mass forced testing, forced lockdowns, and bringing out the military to enforce it all. The results of this recent Chinese outbreak are food shortages, overwhelmed quarantine facilities, clashes between citizens and health workers, and an outpouring of desperate pleas and anti-government posts on social media. The impact of the Chinese outbreaks is best seen in closed factories, cut services for railways and airlines, and empty streets. Whether this all-out zero-COVID policy will work, it's unknown. How long these shutdowns and lockdowns will last, it's uncertain. What we can certainly glean from the situation: the numbers of infections on the mainland are still in the beginning stages of an exponential rise. That means this could get much darker, and there is no visible light on the horizon that can be seen right now. Expect that the current dramatic decrease in international commerce output will plummet even further. Commerce grinds to a stop. Over 400 million people across 45 cities in China are under full or partial lockdown. To put this into perspective, Shanghai, just one of those cities, is 3 times the size of New York City. Shanghai and Guangzhou combined have over twice the population of the whole metro area of New York, comprising New York, Newark, and Jersey City. For my non-American audience, just these 2 lockdown major industrial areas of China, they have the equivalent population of 62% of the United Kingdom. Just 2 areas are nearly double in population of the entirety of Australia. The New York metro area contributes $1.5 trillion to the gross domestic product of the United States. That's 7% of the whole country's GDP. These 2 regions of China contribute to the equivalent of that in gross domestic product, not in year, but in just 2 months. With the current outbreak, people are not working. Products are not being manufactured. Parts aren't being manufactured. Cargo ships aren't being loaded. Trucks aren't carrying products to ports. In some cases, trucks of goods are attempting to get around roadblocks to get to ports hundreds of miles away to try and keep goods loaded and sent to ports overseas. Even as some ports remain operating at vastly diminished capacity, their trucking industry suffers even more. Getting those containers loaded at a manufacturer that may or may not be operating onto a truck is problematic when Shanghai's trucking operations are at 20% of capacity right now. Containers out of China are on a current trajectory to drop by an incredible economy crashing 50% in this month alone. And the draconian lockdown is only getting worse by the day as Xi Jinping and his government tries to get ahead of the outbreak. Beijing, which is the political capital of China, was expected to be spared the lockdowns by many analyses. Still, Twitter lit up on April 24th with reports of the Chinese state police starting to implement similar measures to those seen in preparation for lockdowns in other cities. Shanghai is a significant source for America's semiconductors and electronic supply chains that feed our country's electronics, automotive, and consumer goods. Cargo airlines have canceled all flights in or out of the city, and more than 90% of the trucks supporting import and export deliveries are currently out of action. It would be easy to be dismissive and simply opt not to purchase some new product, but you would not be realizing the full scope of China's production. In addition to the crazy egg beater gadget or knife or cell phone case you might see and purchase online, China is producing key components that keep our power systems, trucks, cars, homes, refrigerators, planes, and so much more operating. From artificial flowers to active pharmaceutical ingredients, from wires to home appliances, from hardware to custom printed socks, from electrical transformers to solar panels, air fryers, computers, vehicles, optical equipment, textiles, furniture, plastics, clothing, and so much more has been increasingly produced in China. You can probably go without the custom printed socks your whole life, but you'll eventually need a part for your vehicle, generator, or appliance. You might have wanted a Tesla or a freezer in your garage. Neither of those products may be available in the coming months. Beyond that, the world may need some or all of the 5 leading food exports: soybeans, pork, cotton, corn, and grains. As we know, though, China has been hoarding grain for at least the last year, perhaps for the possibility of these lockdowns that she currently faces. This is all occurring right now following 2 years of global supply chain failures that have left many scrambling in different directions to keep product scarcity and prices low, even as consumer demand roars back. The lopsided supply and demand equation will push prices far higher than their already 40-year high. Timelines. It takes an average of 27 days for a vessel loaded in China to reach a U.S. port. Since this all started dropping at the beginning of April, the drop in volume at U.S. ports should begin to materialize at the beginning of May. That's initially going to be great for U.S. ports, as they have in recent months halved the backlog of container ships in what was 20 months of elevated Asian imports in a seesaw recovery. Finally, warehouses currently stacked to the rafters will find themselves with the room. It will be bad news for ports and U.S. truckers in June and through the summer, as those same warehouses find even more space, catch up to existing vessels, and will have no product-laden ships on the horizon. The news in June and July will be filled with word about the crisis. By then, it will be too late for many. If the current Chinese lockdown continues through May and broadens in scope, it will be a long time before production can scale up to meet demand. Supply chains, they don't come back on with the flick of a switch. Even if China reopened tomorrow, we still will feel the wave of the current crisis for a month, the aftermath for a month more. Every day that China remains primarily closed for business is felt at a minimum of 60 days later here in the United States. So, the pain they feel now will be yours in 60 days, and the day or more they spend ramping back up will be another month of delays and product scarcity on your end. When it comes to timelines and scarcity, most of the world is kind of at the zenith of a roller coaster. We are about to go very rapidly over the top of that apex, gaining momentum as we go and pulling other countries behind us faster and faster into a period of scarcity and economic retraction. The COVID recovery has, so far, been a roller coaster of ups and downs, but we seem to be heading into an even larger high, and we have yet to see the actual depths of the low. 3 factors at work. There are 3 critical factors to watch, and all 3 combine to determine inflation and product scarcity. The first is consumer demand. Increasingly, people are moving away from spending their dollars on things and spending more on travel, entertainment, and just going out. People are eager to do anything to get out after lockdowns and mandates have been lifted. This decreases pressure on consumer goods, so that's still there. The second critical factor is product transit. If you're looking to get toys for Christmas or repair your car with that one part you need, your wait time for that shipment from China has already gone from 2 months to 6 months. That gap will only widen with these protracted lockdowns in China. Expect an added 2 to 4 months wait on top of that of the already 6-month delay. So if you were planning on a good Christmas where your kids get everything they want, they should be making their lists now and you should be putting your orders in before mid-May. Otherwise, you might want to look for non-Chinese product goods that don't use any plastics, wiring, or parts from China in their construction. Christmas aside, you can expect the same extended timelines for parts and raw materials. Basically, if it came from China or has any part in it made in China, and you were already going to have to wait a few months, you need to add another couple of months wait, and that wait will need to be increased every day the lockdowns continue. The third critical factor is the offloading at the port and shipment to the warehouses, intermodal transit centers, and inevitably to your retailers and manufacturers here. Railroad workers, truckers, warehouse laborers, packers, unpackers, and even those stocking your shelves suffered greatly during the pandemic lockdown. Many could not justify keeping a job with no actual work, so they transitioned to other work. Companies all along the distribution chain will have difficulty wooing those workers back. As a result, warehouses now stocked well from this last oscillation of getting all those container ships unloaded that were backed up again will suffer from a lack of product coming in to be offloaded. Likely they will again downsize their labor force to align with the shrinking demand. These 3 factors oscillate back and forth between highs and lows. Enough workers and not enough workers. Enough supply, then no new supply. Too many container ships and soon not enough container ships. Lots of eager consumers, then no consumers. Each factor ripples across the supply chain and pressures each other factor. The result for you will be even higher prices and a need to pivot your consumer demand or simply go without. The impact on you. Higher prices, even beyond their 40-year high, are inevitable. Shortages of some products will continue and you'll have to pivot to other alternatives. For many in the world and highly developed nations, this is easy to accomplish in the initial phase. If you can't get sunflower oil because of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, no problem. Simply start using olive oil or canola oil. If you can't get wheat or its price goes too high, merely substitute another grain flour in abundance. Initially, some don't feel the product scarcity at all, except in the pocketbook or in the form of frustration at the store. The real impact is on industries you don't see from your vantage point in the retail store. The solar company you wanted to use, they may not be able to get the solar panels, circuits, and other electrical components that they need. Your power company might not be able to get what it needs to maintain power lines properly. Water treatment facilities, gas companies, electricity providers, hospitals, drugstores, and many other critical industries, they rely upon Chinese products, parts, ingredients, and raw materials. Your mechanic might not be able to get that part they need. Auto dealers might not be able to get the cars they need on their lot. It is much more difficult for a manufacturer to pivot to a different formulation or construction than it is for you to simply choose an alternative flour. You could wake up one morning only to find your public transport isn't working because it can't be fixed, or your power is out until the parts can arrive from other states. We don't realize how complete the world's dependence is on cheap Chinese labor and goods. In this case, it's like a really big thread holding the supply chain together. We can't accurately predict how critical that thread is. We don't know what will inevitably unravel due to pulling that thread out. Global economies are incredibly intertwined, more so than at any other time in our world's history. That level of integration is not something that can be easily undone, reversed, or sidestepped. and it is incredibly costly to the global economy to do so. If there is a silver lining in this inconvenience burgeoning onto a full-on scarcity, is that we will be collectively forced to find alternatives to Chinese products. This could actually increase manufacturing in the United States. We're already seeing a strong movement towards prepping, self-sufficiency, energy-dependent off-grid living, gardening, and a return to old ways of doing things as more and more people become aware of the fragility of the system that they are dependent upon. This coming slowdown will lead to more people prepping, which will lead to more difficulty getting staple products at a time when supplies are already dwindling. This may lead to people selling their homes in suburban and urban settings for land elsewhere that will provide them with some more opportunities for self-sufficiency. We are already starting to witness a tip of that possible exodus with people who are increasingly working more from home. With the gas prices continuing to rise, the trend is likely to continue away from the office, and this encourages home-based prepping. We really can't accurately forecast how dramatic of an impact China's lockdowns will be on the global economy, but it isn't looking good. With the war continuing to escalate in the Ukraine, Russia no longer supplying natural gas to Poland or Bulgaria, Finland and Sweden continue to move towards inclusion in NATO, and the yearly cycles of droughts, floods, crop failures, and other natural disasters. If you haven't started preparing for the worst, you're clearly running out of time. If you've been preparing for any length of time, your ability to navigate the coming chaos will be much easier than your neighbor's ability to do the same. We're currently experiencing a state of disequilibrium where each of these adverse events is compounding on other events. That could lead to a domino effect of collapsing systems, or one or more of the systems will be able to absorb the shock and work to restabilize the whole. For now, focus on your water, food, and energy preps with a keen eye on the coming shortages. The coming months could see Putin's invasion of Moldova or worse. Two things are inevitable. The prices will go up and the higher food and energy prices could last for years, if not decades, before any real balance is restored. If you'd like more information on this topic, consider one of these other videos and please subscribe to this channel. You definitely should check out the video 5 items that will soon disappear, which I've posted a link to on the screen here. As always, stay safe out there.